This is not a show and might not even be a connection. Here's Judah and guest.
And hello, everybody. My name is Judah McNeil, and I'm here with Michael Katuzis, an old friend from Trinity International University, somebody who I met through another old friend I should have on here. What's that in the background? I hear a lot of like a rumbling sound. What is that?
Rumbling?
It's like a...
It just started raining. I don't know.
It's raining there. Cool.
You can hear that?
Nice. Yeah. That's all right. Not when you're talking, not when I'm talking. But
Okay.
do you remember Todd Williams? Of course you remember Todd Williams.
I remember Todd. He was one of my groomsmen.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize
Yeah.
he was one of your groomsmen. I should have him on here. But Michael and I have had, I don't know, we've had, recently we had a couple of discussions. He sought me out. He saw something I posted on Facebook and we reconnected, right?
Yep. I saw that you had moved to North Carolina, and that's where I was at. I was like, wow, old Trinity alum. And you're
That's
like
right.
about 2.5 hours away. So, and I'll occasionally see some of the stuff you put up on Facebook. I don't get on as much, but I do see some of the stuff. I like some of the stuff you put up there. And so I commented on a few things, and we just started talking. And
Yeah. And I've always remembered you as somebody who's very serious-minded as far as theology. What was your major at Trinity?
My major was originally a master's of religion. I was interested in studying world religions as a way to understand what other people believe, so that you could then, properly evangelize. You know what obstacles are in the way, and you could give them, what they need to hear. As the degree program was dragging on, and I was basically getting tired of school and the bill, I think they decided to phase out that degree, and they said, hey, the school contacted all MAR people and said, if you downgrade to a Master's of Christian Studies, you can get out a semester sooner. I was like, sure. I got all the religion courses that I needed by then anyway. So I did, and got out. So I ended up with Christian Studies, but big emphasis on world religions and stuff like that. I was originally hoping to go on to a doctorate, and teach on the collegiate level. So.
Okay. And you came back to North Carolina do you miss Illinois at all?
I miss the food in Chicago.
Yeah.
And I do like Chicago. I really did enjoy it, in Chicagoland area. They got a nice Greek town too. I'm Greek, So I do miss that. I do not miss the traffic. I do not miss how expensive it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
that good food costs a lot of money.
But I like it down here. I've always been a warm weather guy. I was born and raised in the South. So, I like heat and going to the beach. The beach is hour and 45 minutes from here. So it's great.
Hour and 45 minutes. So you're not too far away. Okay.
Nope. Not far at all.
Nice. Well, we already have a comment. Diego Ivan says tacos. Yeah. Hey, man. I tell you what, him and I used to we worked together in Chicago, and some of the best authentic tacos. Although I went recently to a local place that was pretty good, pretty darn good. Well, anyways, we want to get started talking about a topic, and we'll get to know you more, Mike, as the time goes on. Is it okay if I call you Mike, or you go by Mike, right?
Mike, Michael, hey you, it all works.
Hey you.
Yeah.
Well, you can only call me Judah.
Okay.
No, I'm just kidding.
Sure.
They used to call me Jude in. Sorry, one of my kids coming through. No, okay. They used to call me Jude in Canada. Hey, Jude. Jude, they'd call me in French. Jude. Anyways, let's look at. So today we want to talk about this particular topic here. It's an article called "It's Time for a New Culture War Strategy" by Kevin DeYoung. Now, this is something put out by the Gospel Coalition, right?
Yes.
And I noticed it on Facebook a couple places. It got tons of. It seemed like it was a controversy, and I read it, and I didn't think it was that controversial, but maybe it is. Were you able to read it?
Now, I read the article, but I was looking for the comments. No, there was no comments attached to the bottom of the article, and so I didn't know where you got them. I wanted to hear what people were saying, what their issues were.
Yeah, my comments were on my personal Facebook page.
Okay,
sorry. But somebody's personal, yeah.
Yeah. I just looked at it from the link you had sent, and I didn't actually see you'd posted it on posted on your page, your Facebook page?
No. See, that's the thing. It was somebody else posted. A couple people posted it on their Facebook page, and I was reading the comments and like, whoa, really? I should post it, but I don't know because it got so much. So today I was accused of being divisive by my own grandmother.
Okay.
I love her to death. Nani, if you're listening, I love you. Because of COVID stuff, and I wouldn't disagree. I mean, I wouldn't disagree. I'm not trying not to be divisive. Should I be trying not to be divisive?
Well, it depends because it depends. Were you just arguing, or was there something you were saying that was true, but the truth divides? If the truth divides, then what do you do? Are we supposed to be quiet because it angers people?
Well, that's the key. No,
I don't know. You tell me. I don't know what you wrote or what you said.
I don't actually know. It's just something she pulled off of my Facebook that she found divisive. And look, the truth is, I am, and the theme, by the way, the theme of Not a Show tends to be, no, I shouldn't say. I should say the theme of my approach tends to be cocksure, contrarian cowboy.
Okay.
That's what I've been called, a cocksure contrarian. I added cowboy because, I don't know, the flair.
Okay. It works.
But, yeah. I don't want to be a contrarian, actually. I really don't.
It's surprising. You don't strike me as a contrarian, at least in our interactions that we had at school and in here. I mean, but I don't know. Well, maybe we'll see.
Well, and I have to be honest. In college, I read a lot of Piaget, and he talked. He's a psychologist who talked a lot about stretching. And, he talked about the human psyche like a rubber band, and you want to, he's talking primarily about children, but I like to look at conversations like this. You stretching people beyond their capacity so that when they come back, when the rubber band comes back, it's more towards the middle. So I would actually think of myself as more of a moderate, but,
well,
not everybody.
I don't know. I look at it like this, you might be a moderate, you may not be, I don't know, but just because someone levels the accusation you're being divisive doesn't mean you are. You can examine yourself and tell if you're just trying to just flare everyone up. I've seen people like that. Typically on the internet, they're called internet trolls.
Yeah.
You don't strike me as a troll. Maybe, I don't know.
I think there are some things. I've been called a troll before. I think there are some methods I use that are trolly. Maybe it's the beard.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's get to this. So this article is about. So when I read it, it didn't seem controversial at all to me. But of course, I've always been. When I went to a Christian college, and when I went to college, I was very clear. I'm not looking for a wife. I'm not what did I say in college? Of course, this may have been sort of. I mean, it's funny. I seek the truth, even if it is divisive. And so sometimes I have divisive. I said, I'm not looking for a wife. I'm not looking to get married. I'm looking to have kids. And in order to have kids, I must get married. And which is a pleasant additive, right? But I've always been anxious to have kids. To me, having children is the glory of a family and having a family. And so when I read this article, I thought, there's nothing controversial to me. I find this right on. What about you?
What were people saying in the comments? Why were they rejecting what he was saying? I'm just curious.
I actually didn't pay I read somebody said that there was a racist undertones because it was there was some in so there was different people that posted it.
Okay.
There was some people that said that there was some. It was like a mandate that if you were a Christian woman, you have to have lots of kids, and that causes some backlash. That causes it feels very. What's that show that everybody talks about with the ladies in red? Just very patriarchal in tone.
Okay.
Patriarchal.
There you go. So the primary problem that people had that you saw was that they felt that if you suggested having more children, first, I guess maybe you should outline what the article's about. I mean, if people haven't read this, then they'll kind of have context to where we're going. What was the,
So for me, the article says, if you are, it is written, so the Gospel Coalition is a coalition between, to me, from what I can tell, is a coalition between conservatives and Christians, which I think would offend people. I understand. Yeah, some people. And it talked from the beginning. It talks about the failures of the strategy to vote in a Republican president based on his choice of Supreme Court nominees, because recently Supreme Court has fallen on the side of has fallen on a side that is less than most Christians would hope for, as far as like the LGBT, fallen more on the side of LGBT than on
the Christian model.
Well, I'll say conservative Christians model, would hope for, and I think they've made. He explained that it would make it so that trans girls would be able to, so boys that have transitioned to men would be able to, boys would be able to play on women's sports teams and stuff like that. So it has created a precedent that he was not happy with. And he said, instead of voting, instead of putting our hope in our vote, he mentioned the Benedict option, which I think we talked about. Maybe it's something of like just staying out of politics and influencing your close network of your sphere of influence.
Yeah.
He said instead we should focus on, and this is what was interesting to me, because a lot of the comments talked about how many kids he says having lots of kids, but the emphasis to me is on catechizing them. The
catechizing.
Yeah, I call it catechizing. That's what my friend. But yeah, catechesis and discipling them, so that we raise up families, and the future is held by discipled and righteous people that we have catechized.
Yeah.
What was your takeaway?
My takeaway from what I read was that basically, as we saw that the Trump's appointed Supreme Court justice cited and wrote the majority opinion on that, defining sex, where you could now genetic identity and sexual orientation. And all the problems that's now going to create for society, and how so many people have put their emphasis on their hope on basically politics. He said that's not the way to go, and he said it sounded like he was saying the way to go would be to have us maybe pull back a little bit and have lots of kids and train them up in the Lord. And he didn't outright say it, but it kind of sounded like kind of breathe them out. You know what I mean? Eventually, once you got a bunch of numbers, people, you can influence. I think his idea was that you could then influence things on a ground level. Yeah. And he said it shouldn't surprise us. We shouldn't put our hope in judges and presidents. And I do remember him saying, our children is what we're doing to put the hope into. And that was the takeaway I got from it. So yeah.
I got another comment from my cousin Miriam Jizik. She says, I know that room you're in, cuz. Yeah, she knows this room. This has been in the family for years. So speaking of family, yeah, I think it's interesting that the people that I have had the most difference with have been people that that were not very interested in having a big family. The people that I have found most solidarity with as far as theology goes and philosophy have been those that have had bigger families. I don't know if that's coincidence. I don't think it is.
I don't think it's coincidence. No.
Speaking of which, I find solidarity with you, Mike. How many kids do you have?
7. 7 kids.
You have 7 children. So talk to me about that.
Okay. Basically it started out, I came, this isn't like my big fat Greek wedding where like, the woman's job is to make babies, feed them and make babies. Nothing like that. I came from a family of 5 boys, and it was wonderful growing up. My brothers were in many respects some of my best friends, and we had a pretty tight-knit family, and I enjoyed that. And I'd met people who would have like 1 kid. I'm not saying that if there's only 1 kid in the family, it's bad, but the kid would be like, man, I wish I had brothers or sisters, and they said that. And I got it because I had them. Like a rainy day, you go upstairs and play in the rooms and do all this stuff. And so I was kind of like, I'd like to have about the same 4 or 5 because it was great. The way we came about it, though, is I started, and actually the guy in the article that we're discussed birth control. And he kind of went off on a little side and said, I don't like how, because I think he sensed the same issue that you're talking about. A lot of people were like having problems with what he was saying, partly because in a way he's saying start having more kids. And birth control is in essence what keeps a lot of people from having children. They're purposely, hey, we've got 2 planned and we're done, Now to bring it back to me, as I was originally just thinking, yeah, we'll use it, no problem, whatever. But as I started getting into the methods and started doing research, I was at Focus on the Family in 2003. And there was a Dr. Larimore. He's a PhD. He does all sorts of research if you want to look into this. And I'd never heard this before, even in Christian institutions or anything like that. But they had mentioned that the pill, the way it works is that, there's 3 ways it works. It affects the endometrium wall, so if conception takes place, if the what's the biological term for when sperm and cell come together? Egg.
Conception.
Well, and conception, after conception takes place, it travels down the tube and implants on the endometrium wall. And one of the hormones makes it very hard for that to take place.
Okay.
All right. Now, if you, that's one of the ways it affects it. Another way is it prevents ovulation. Another way what's the third one? It makes the mucus thicker so sperm can't travel as easily. But the combination of all 3, and hey, bio, man.
Trigger warning.
Sorry, man.
For me.
Sorry.
No, it's
you asked. You asked. So.
All right. Okay. No. Hey, this is good. All
right. So anyway, I believe life begins at conception, and so he said the stats are that 14% of the time, sperm makes it, and conception takes place, and the endometrium wall is just made ragged. So because of the presence of the pill, the hormones that are in the pill, and it causes it to flush this out. I was like, well, that's abortifacient. He goes, yes. And I was like, whoa. And I remember when he brought it up, it was actually pretty divisive because there was 80 Christians in the room. They were taking students, next generation Christian leaders, and trying to train them up. I was part of some like little graduate program there. And when they brought that up, it kind of shook the room a little bit, because then everyone in there was like, hey, yeah, we're going to, oh, what? Are you serious? And then people started, well, when does life really begin? Maybe it's 3 weeks, and then, or when it's suddenly they start saying things that was just like, they're starting to sound like abortion, like the arguments on that side. I do believe life begins in conception. And so at that point, I was like, well, we can't use the pill. And especially as I found out how it worked, basically inserts hormones in the body that basically, as long as those hormones are present, and that takes place as the body is basically knitting a child in the womb and preparing to eventually give birth in 10 months, it keeps this hormone in the body. And as that happens, the side effects is that it makes the mucus thicker, ceases ovulation, and all this other stuff. And so your body's in like this weird preparation mode for pregnancy that never happens. And if you're taking these things for 10, 20, 30 years, the effects it can have are pretty bad. They've done a lot of research on some of this stuff to show that these hormone type birth controls can be very bad on the woman's health. Breast cancer 4 times as much, all sorts of things, which would make sense. I mean, the body.
I've heard some say it could cause MS and can cause different things. Yeah. To bring it
back around.
Yeah.
When I saw that, we're like, we can't do that. And that was the one I was intending to use. And then we started looking at some of the options, and some were just kind of, let's be frank, gross, but and then we started looking at it, and we said, well, the scriptures say children are a blessing. I was like, so what we're going to do is we're not going to try, and we're not going to not try. We're just going to come together in love. And if God blesses, since he opens and closes the womb, then he'll bless. And if he doesn't, he doesn't. And we've had 7. So,
wow.
Yeah. Now, a lot of people are like, it's going to happen. But I've met people who've done it that way and have never had children. In fact, my wife's sister has only had 2, and that was with fertility options. So I don't think it's always a given, if that makes any sense.
I completely agree. We as a family, my family does not believe in contraception, and we only have 4.
Okay, so there you go.
And it was a
lot of people want, but
that?
I think that might be 2 more than what I think a lot of people want.
Which is interesting. What does that mean to want a certain amount of kids? Like what? I don't get it. Like what causes people to want fewer kids from what you've experienced?
Definitely you can plan a lot more, and there's a lot more freedom to do what you'd like to do. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I'm not going to just say, hey, everything's wonderful with, 7. I mean, when you think 7 kids, there's going to be times you're like, that's got to be crazy. And yes, there are times it gets crazy. Yeah. But at the same time, I see how much it causes you to really get, what's the word I'm looking for? You start to use ingenuity. You really start to figure things out. Actually, we have to have trained up our children to help us in this. I can't do laundry for 7 kids, and my wife can't. I can help her, but and I think a lot of people, the way they parent, they don't. They kind of spoil them. They don't really raise them, train them up, which is one of the points that this guy makes in the article. And if you're gonna have that many kids, it will be utter chaos if you don't train them up. Like you have to teach them, how to work together as a unit and all this and that. And when you start to get, I don't see how you can detach that from God. Well, I mean, I'm bringing my faith into this too. I love God and I want them to love the Lord. And so I bring this aspect in. But I think that we've had to learn how to operate. And it's honestly a little more akin to what you'd see how people used to do things up until when was the birth control pill? 30s, 40s, something like that? 40s?
Actually, I think it was until the 50s.
50s, something like that, yeah. So, as a result, it's been good. I mean, I've got children that cook their own breakfast. They make us breakfast in the morning. My oldest is 11. My youngest is 2 months. And our kids, they make their own breakfasts. And we're talking about they'll bring out the skillet. They'll put the ham on. They'll put the eggs. They'll make egg sandwiches. They help with meals. They help with, we've trained them to, clean up. They do chores. They clean bathrooms. Now, it takes time for you to sit down and do this. And I'll tell you what, that's going to scare a lot of people away, because a lot of time I could be reading, playing games, doing what I want to do. I have to now devote towards training children. And it does take, a toll. But in the long run, as I see them really growing up into not just responsible children, but I start to see because I'm you can't really truly properly train anyone up apart from God. And so as we've trained them up in Christ as well, I'm really seeing some kids flower. And I think that's the idea this guy was trying to get at. That makes sense?
Yeah. I remember back when I was in college, there was a real push by conservative Christians, not a push, but maybe an illumination of the fact that Muslims had on average 5.5 children per, no, it might have been more, but I think it was 5.5 children per family.
Yeah.
And that that was that was the first time in Europe we started realizing that I think France was dealing with a culture problem, in the sense that that Muslim families were having way more children, and at that point were growing up, and the Muslim culture was overtaking the French culture.
Yeah.
Because European culture, very few were having more than one, some none.
They're actually, apart from immigration, from what I've read, Europe's native population is shrinking. They're not reproducing. But then it's a secular. I've been to Europe, and I was there in 2001, and again in 2008, and it's very secular. They're unashamed of it, unashamedly so. And so when you're looking at things, what does the secular put forth? Career, money, power, the good life, that kind of thing. And if that's the stuff that you're pursuing, kids are a hindrance to that. Who wants to raise up a kid? They're brats, they're snot. I got a kid. I'll give you an example. One time we opened the door. One of my kids had pooped his pants, and the youngest one, he had like overflowed the diaper. It was like a fountain, it was like a fondue fountain. And the younger one was in there with him, finger painting with it all over the walls. Okay? Now, so when that stuff happens, I get why they don't want to do this, because you got to clean, you got to train, you got blah, blah, blah.
It's a nightmare. It can be a nightmare, yeah.
But there are some very special moments that take place where as you train them, as you love on them, and you see them flower. You see them each of their own unique personalities. Yeah. This one's kind of like grandma. This one's kind of like mom. Look at that and how unique each one is. One's got an engineering mind. One's a total artist and all that. And you see how unique and individualistic they are. You can see how God can really use such people to further his kingdom and do wonderful things. So I'm like, but if God's not in your mind, if he's not part of the picture and what you're choosing to live for, and it takes time to do all this stuff up, then kids are just mouths to feed. They cost money. You got to clothe them. Although clothing was not as hard as you think. I mean, we go to the thrift store, $10, and I've clothed.
In America, clothing is super easy. Yeah. Because so many families around it. Now, one of the things. Okay, there's so much. There's so little time. So much to talk about here. But one of the things that I've heard recently, a good teacher recently talked about the importance of having a familial and social network, because we will face hardship.
Yeah.
And without that network, we will face hell. Especially if we have a lot of kids, and we don't want to bring our children into hell. So there is a sense, like, I wanted, and I heard the exact same thing from you. I wanted to have more kids, many more kids. My goal was always to have 6 or 8. I wanted to have even. I grew up in an even family. I ended up having as many as my family had. We had 4, and I grew up in children of 4. But there was always a sense of, I had a wonderful upbringing. I thoroughly enjoy my parents and my siblings, why wouldn't I want to continue that? You know?
Yeah.
But not everybody experiences that.
Well, sometimes you got families that are busted and broken, and people don't want to, you want a family. I'm like, my family's messed up. I hate my sister. I hate my brother. That stuff. But that's where you take God out of the picture, I think. When you see that, actually, let me qualify that. Not entirely. Sometimes God divides families. You might have some people that are starting to walk, and it creates problems, and they're like, oh, the reason the problem is because you're hyper religious nut over there, and they might be repulsed by what's being lived in. They're repulsed by God's ways, that kind of thing, because it interferes with the way they want to live. I do think it really does boil down to what you're offering your life up to, and I think I've seen it where it causes division. Like, I don't know if it makes any sense.
I agree. No, when it comes to righteousness can be repugnant. If we are living our lives according to selfishness, righteousness can be repugnant and divisive.
Yes. I'll give you an example. In the article, he mentions go to Target and be the family that's counterculture. Now, I'm not trying to be countercultural. I didn't have children to be counterculture. They're not like tools to change society. I do it because I love children and I love God and I love my wife, and this is what happens. But that's what happens when you do. Anyway.
No, time out. I do want to insert in here that at Trinity, I was in the counseling department, and Leanne, your wife, she was always she was one of the most beautiful people in our counseling department, and you weren't even in the counseling department. All these guys were vying, looking at Leanne like, hey, this might be a future wife. And it was to all of our surprise that this theology guy he's from North Carolina. He ended up with Leanne. How did that happen?
Dude, I'm gonna have to have her watch this because she'll go to chuckle out of that. She's like, nobody likes me. I don't. She was actually sad. She's like, I was gonna leave, grad school. Thought I was gonna be married, and I met her in the last semester. She was leaving. We didn't start talking till the last 2 weeks of her stay before she graduated.
It was like
in itself.
It was a really fast thing, right? Like, because it took everybody by surprise. Like, Michael, he married Leanne. Yeah. The beautiful blonde in counseling. Yeah. Leanne was such a joy to, she was part of our whole counseling group and everything,
Yeah.
And of course, at the time I was dating Chanda, but there was a lot of, anyways, it's weird now, but we always thought like, wow, who's like, a lot of my friends were like, who's this Michael guy? I was like, yeah, this pretty smart guy. She probably talked to him.
Yeah.
Have you ever talked to Mike? Yeah.
But to bring it back to the point of the Target thing, with a large family, honestly, a lot of times we get scowls. We get my kids will notice people will look at you and and why is this person scowling? And we've had enough people come up to me. Don't you know where babies come from? I'm like, is this guy for real? I don't even know this dude, and he's coming over, and sometimes even religious people saying some very hard, harsh, mean stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes when I'm not trying to use my family as like some counterculture, tool. I'm just loving them as they are, and want them to experience life and know God and all that. But there are times it gets kind of hard to walk out there with 7 kids because of all the stares and the gapping jaws and the comments that come. There's this Italian place here in town that we go to. We love eating there, and no joke, every time we open the door, all heads turn.
Yeah.
Whispers, and they're just staring, and the head, they don't even hide it. They're just like this. They just follow us as we walk by. And it's like, okay, we'll take that big table. Or a lot of times we don't have a table, so they have to push a lot of them together, so it's a big scene. Yeah. And they expect, oh my gosh, here's kids. It's going to be crazy. They're going to be yelling. Argh!
it's going to be bad, right? Like everybody thinks lots of kids
is going to be bad and
times.
obnoxious. And I will say this because a lot of people don't raise their kids. They don't train them. They don't discipline them. We discipline ours. I'm like, kids, you act up, you're getting it. And I was like, I'll take you in the bathroom and light you up. We'll spank them. But it's not just discipline. Okay. The point isn't to just control the behavior. When someone's being rebellious, someone's being obnoxious, they're not being loving. And the fulfillment of the law, all the law is this: love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. We're called to love. And so love, it's not selfish, it's not boastful, it's not proud or arrogant and doing crazy things. And you can't tell me what I want this instead of pizza, or I want pizza instead of this. They learn to be humble and stuff like that. And so as we train them, it's taken hold. God's blessed it. And so we'll sit and all these people are watching. And then the total catastrophe that they're expecting doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And then suddenly you'll actually have some people come up, oh my gosh, I just didn't know what to expect. Whatever you guys are doing, wow, you guys got the greatest kids. You're blessed. I'm like, well, we had to, train them to this point.
Yeah.
But I will definitely say it's not just been correcting that has brought them. Like it always comes to God, because when, there's the standard that they're to live by, we're sinful. We do things we want. Some people don't like sharing. Some people do. So, and some people are proud. They can't be corrected, whatever. And when they suddenly start to try to live up to these standards that we're teaching them and they fail at it, they're just like, what's going on? Why can't I do that? I'll tell you why. Because you have a flesh. Yeah. You have a sin nature. You're fallen, just like daddy, just like mommy, just like the rest of us. Yeah. And so as I bring this up, I'm like, this is why you need Christ. This is why you need him in you. You need your sins forgiven. And for each of my kids, 4 of them are believers right now. The other 3 are just too young. But they eventually got to a point where they said they really started to see, wow, I do desire to do evil. And I do. And I've the first 4 at some point or another have come, I want to be different. I need God's help. Yeah. It's like, that's good. That's where daddy was. That's where mommy was. And we lead them to Christ. And I'm not joking. You see a dramatic change. You see the fruit of the Spirit working in these children's lives. Yeah. And it surprises people. People will come up to me, you guys just must be perfect. No, we're not perfect. We are not perfect at this. Or they'll be like, you are just blessed with the most perfect children. Like, it was a random dice roll and, I hit the lottery. No,
the genetic dice roll,
lottery,
right? Yeah. Genetic lottery.
Like, no, not at all.
So Allison says, she always tunes into these. She's a good friend of ours. She says, many people grew up in Christian families and did not have positive experience, much more so than secular families who had someone become religious, like an influence. They became influential.
I would actually say she's accurate. She's probably, I would say that's probably more so the problem. I've seen too many people where the religious family, and I'm going to actually underline religious, because the religious tends to focus on do's, don'ts. They tend to focus on rules and certain perceptions of God or truth, or their supposed truths that aren't really grounded in God. It's more religion is the best way I can put it. And
well, it's what you were just saying, focusing on what not to do rather than focusing on, hey, we're doing this to be loving to each other. That all the commandments boil down to love. Love of God and love of each other. Yeah.
Yes. And I've seen I used to be a teacher. I taught for 5 years, and I cannot tell you, and then, kids I went to school with, people I went to college with, as I watched where they go, growing up in the families like Allison talked about, I've seen atheists. I've seen people total rejection. I'm now LGBT this. I hate everything that they stood for. They just, it's like this total, if they stood for this, I'm against it. And it's because there was just this ham-fisted kind of, this is the way you must live. And I've seen people where, like, you got to wear the skirt down to your ankles and you got to wear your hair down to your rear end. And if you do wear makeup, you're a prostitute, and all these terrible things. And, and you look in the scriptures and, you see when God is talking about his beloved Israel and Judah, he talks about adorning her with beautiful things and this and that. Of course, we're to be modest, but there's a way to look beautiful and modest, and not like a prostitute, and stuff like that. There's differences between the two, but I tend to find that there's this reactionary thing where love isn't moving, because one of the characteristics of love is that it delights in the truth. If you're following just to get behavior down, and I also find that fear is moving as well. Like, I don't want my kid growing up into this, becoming an alcoholic or a drug user or sleep around. And so they put this tremendous pressure, and they draw lines that God himself doesn't even draw.
Yeah. And
it's fear that's moving them to draw these things. So it's not grounded in the truth. They'll be like, I don't want you ever getting drunk, so no alcohol for you. It's the devil. You touch it, it's the devil, and you're a devil to me. You're dead to me, kind of thing. And of course they're going to respond. God wants us to what's the word? God wants us to operate within the boundaries he has set.
Yes. Love
delights in the truth. And so the things that are true are good. Alcohol's fine. Don't get drunk. That's what the scripture says. So don't get drunk. There's dancing. You're not a sinner if you go out and dance. There are certain dances that are sinful for sure. I hate to say it. In college, I used to do some of them, but at the club anyway. Don't want to remember those days. Anyway, but I do know that. I mean, I'm Greek. We have Greek dancing. We have cultural Greek dancing where they're fun. Kids and grandmas are out there in these big lines, locked arms and doing just wonderful things, going to the beat.
I would say that I would say it's even, it might even be a sense of self-consciousness, maybe self-deprecation that keeps parents from really embracing their parenthood. I would say embrace yourself as a parent, whether it be 2 kids, 1 kid, 7 kids, 9 kids.
Yeah.
The idea of really embracing yourself as a parent, loving your parenting, and really seeing it as something that is a vocation rather than something that's, everybody kind of does. I just fall into it. You gotta have kids, whatever, blah, blah, blah. That it's a particular vocation.
See, that's the thing though. Love has to be the thing that's the motivator. A parenting means you're training up a child. Mm-hmm. If love is not moving, it's going to be a heartless task, which I see when I was a teacher. I see more parents. They're not loving their kids. They spoil them. They dump all this stuff on them. They don't draw boundaries with them. They don't instruct them why they should follow in this way or not. It's just daddy says this or mama says this, and this is what it. And usually fear is driving. I don't want them to do this. Yeah. We're not teaching them how to operate within their freedoms, but partly also I found a lot of times is because how do I want to put this? All right. They're not loving their children. Yeah. They're failing to meet the second commandment, which is to love your neighbor as yourself. Love your fellow man. Okay? Parenting, the whole concept is to love your child. And if you love your child, you're going to train them up. You're going to discipline them. You're going to teach. You're going to instruct them in the ways of God, which is what we're charged to do all the time.
It's to me, it's redefining love, because I think so much love, in today's day and age in our society, love is based on that lovey-gushy feeling and yes. of pleasure rather than how
God says it is.
Right. Entering a stream that's been there for, since God, that is that of joining together, helping each other, even when it's difficult. And actually, mostly when it's difficult, love is what we need to kick in, right?
Yeah, that's the glue that keeps a family together. That's the glue that keeps siblings, husband and wives together, all that stuff like that. If it's not there, it'll crumble in time. You might even have the veneer of a family still working together. And it usually, if love's not moving, it's just duty or because we're family, but they hate each other. And yet, what does it, scripture say? Something is better, a meal of vegetables. I'm trying to remember this one scripture, with love than feasting with strife or something like that. I forget. I have to look it up. Forgive me.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
there's an idea that sometimes, the thing that's gluing people's families together is not love. It's some other thing. And if it ain't love, it's going to be a tremendous heavy burden. And yet love is is our point of existence. And that heavy burden is, if the family members actually turn to Christ, come to me, all you are heavy laden, and I'll give you rest. That's what Jesus said. And basically a family where the father and the mother, the daughters and the sons love the Lord, you're going to see it. And they're operating as God intended. And there's going to be peace there. There's going to be joy. There's going to be strength. There's going to be support. Brothers. I'm sorry, go ahead.
But often in a family, family can be the hardest people to love because even though we're narcissistic, I find that the things that aggravate me the most in my children are, and in my wife, but this goes to a certain philosophy that I have. The things that aggravate me the most in my children are the things that remind me of my failures. When they copy things that I do, that I struggle with and sort of exasperated with inside myself.
Yeah.
That can be the toughest thing to deal with. And that's why, to me, that's why family can be the hardest people to love.
Yeah.
What do we do about that?
You're talking about towards the example you used was towards your children. Like, for example, yeah. I would say on that level, what I feel like I've learned from God is it took time for me to become aware that I even did those said things. Like, first I can't panic. Like, they're their own being and they're God's, whether they're even aware of it or not. Like, he's the one who's training them, trying to direct them to him. Now, as a parent, I'm to direct them to them. I see some of the things that they did that I want to do, that I used to do. I'm like, don't do it. You might respond a little bit more because I don't want you to go that route. But love is patient. It is kind, and you got to check it, And I find myself sometimes, and it shouldn't surprise us as believers, there'll be times it's very hard, and we have to pray to God, help me right now, because I want to go, rah, 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 rah. But I need to show them grace, because it's the grace of God that leads people to repentance. I'm not saying you can't discipline them and all that. Of course, do that too. Right. But what I'm saying is, there's going to be some long suffering and patience, and it will exhaust beyond. Like, I'm a naturally patient guy, and God's taken me beyond what I can be patient with. Like, it's just like murderous thoughts. I'm just like, okay, not really murderous thoughts, but
no, I know what you mean. Yeah, like all the non-parents are like, what?
Yeah. But those are the times where you bow the knee, and it says it in 2 Corinthians where. The point of that, like, God takes you beyond more than you can bear, so that you will not rely on yourselves, but on He who can raise from the dead. That's the point. Because we get to the point where we work ourselves to death, and I can't do this, and then the flesh swells up, and blah blah blah. He's like, yeah, God's like, I did that on purpose. I'm letting it come beyond what you're able to bear, so that you'll lean on me, so that I will strengthen you. And I just read this morning. He said, and He will renew your strength like the eagles. Yeah. And you will run. And you'll not faint. Yeah.
Like feet of what's it of
I've experienced
deer.
That. Yeah. I've experienced it, and when I see that, I see these promises that God says in His Word, and then I say, okay, I'm in this place where I there's nothing left in me to pour into these kids or do that. In fact, I'm just really angry with them and blah blah blah. But Lord, help! It comes. It does come.
It does, but I don't think. I think we got to be careful to explain it in a way that it's like a supernatural thing when we're at our wit's end. I think it comes, but it comes after. I see you as somebody who's dealt with things in himself already. It's like if I haven't dealt with those things I hate so much about me, if I haven't faced them, and so some people call it the shadow. If I haven't really.
How can you train someone up in something you yourself aren't trained in?
Right.
How can I make you a saint? Not make you a saint, because we don't make anyone a saint, but how can I train you up in an opposite way if I myself don't act that way?
And nothing brings that out more. Nothing brings the shadow out. Nothing brings our insecurities out more than than our baby crying. I will say it for me. Nothing. I use I statements. Nothing brings out in me insecurity more than my baby crying, because it's uncontrollable. One, two, I'm in charge, absolutely in charge, right? Like when I'm holding my baby and he or she is crying uncontrollably, I cannot. That's why they call it uncontrollable crying. There's nothing I can do about it, and something in me goes to the darkness, goes to the shadow. Like, what did I do wrong? Goes to, it's accusatory. There's something about a crying baby that's accusatory, whether it's yours or not. Really, when you're in charge of a baby, there's something so accusatory about that cry. Would you agree?
What do you mean? Like accusatory? Like you feel like you're failing it or you're creating this? Like, what? Explain. I'm not fully tracking.
I feel like if like when I really, like I've sat there listening to that cry and really self-examining and felt like there is something in me that wants to explain why this baby is crying, and for some reason it keeps going to my failings instead of going to natural causes or whatever. It goes, for some reason it goes inward for me, and I think, what have I done wrong? What should I do? And then I thought, why do I keep thinking about what I'm doing? Like maybe they're just hungry or whatever,
Yeah, hungry, poopy, tired, the big three,
But there was something, like when my first child in particular, Anna, there was always, like, I noticed, and I'd heard of people talking about this, that there's something accusatory about a cry, a baby's cry, and I felt it, and I thought, wow, why? Because it's a human saying you're not doing enough. And I think that it touches on something and especially, in a grown human, that there's always a voice in our heads, especially if we haven't come in touch with our insecurities, that says you're not enough.
Well, see, I would say this. I can't say that I've gotten to a place, like for the infants, like you said, what am I doing wrong? Mm-hmm. I mean, from just a logical perspective, there's babies especially, there's not much to them. They scream because they're hungry. They scream because they want to be rocked and they're tired. They cry because there might be pain. They might be sick or something like that. Mm-hmm. Or, they soiled themselves and they want cleaned up. I found, like, for me, it was just like, okay, I've checked everything. Sometimes they're just colicky and it's nothing I'm doing. And so, like, I don't turn it to an accusatory thing towards myself.
Yeah.
Now, that being said, I feel like there can be times where we can load it on ourselves. And that's something that, like, because there's an assumption behind that. There's an assumption that if I do A, B will happen. And typically that's true. If he's crying and you feed him, he'll usually stop. If he's gassy, you burp him, he'll burp, and that kind of thing. And then usually, but if all the needs are met and he's still going and it's not pain, he's not ill, sometimes they're just colicky and sometimes it's just grace in your end. There's nothing you're doing wrong. And then it comes to a place where you just have to accept that. There's been times where I've done everything I can and, this kid's right here going, and I'm like, I can't do anything else. There's other things. I'm just going to have to set him down.
Yeah, it's hard to do.
But you know what I've seen? He'll go, and then it stops. He'll on his own. I've seen that take place. I always check to make sure everything is fine. And I will say this though. I want to throw this little curveball. We do not. It says we wrestle not against flesh and blood, and I do think that Satan understands the importance of parenting too. Mm-hmm. And I do think that sometimes he may condemn or might accuse as we go out and doing the things we do, partly because, if we start operating out of fear, if we start operating in these other things apart from love, then bad stuff will happen. It may happen, if we start, if that starts to become our motivation, bad stuff happens, love has to be what motivates. And so I think sometimes he does accuse and condemn. He'll try anything he can to try to, I mean, because think about it. If you start looking at this kid, oh, I can't do it, I'm doing something wrong, you'll start to look at yourself as a terrible parent. Yeah. Okay? You start looking at yourself. There's a scripture that says, as a man thinks within himself, so he is. If you start to think yourself a terrible parent, you'll start acting like a terrible parent. Okay? And so, I just don't know what to do with these things. I'm just terrible with kids. No. Those are the times where it's like, lean in on what you know the truth is. Lean on God. Sometimes you need a little bit of extra oomph to bounce this baby, because sometimes they just don't want to go out.
But that, that takes, that's such a difficult thing to do in the spur of the moment. Just thinking of like 3:00 in the morning, and please go to sleep. Please
go to sleep. Go to sleep, please.
Please stop crying.
Yeah.
It's the rawest position I've ever been in, and you're right. And it's not just people or parents. I think this applies to more than just parents and more than just biological parents, right? There's people that I know, families that have huge families, that have 2 biological and have adopted or all of the children are adopted, so it's not just it's not just that I can't see myself in them, or what it comes down to is, it's a long-term thing. Have I prepared for this moment? Lately a theme for me has been hard times will come, and it's not necessarily a baby. It's a 16-year-old, a client, a customer. At some point, somebody is going to accuse you or be uncontrollable, and in that moment, we can either say, is this about me? What did I do wrong? Or we could say, all I can do is do my best to be Christ-like, and I have submitted, I submit this moment to you, Lord, because I cannot control anything,
Yeah.
But it's impossible to just go along life pleasing ourselves, and then at that moment, all of a sudden have that capacity.
Well, again, I bring it back to inevitably love. There's been times where things have gone on with other kids. Like I had one child who was very rebellious in the beginning, very rebellious. You tell her to do something and she will do just the opposite. And there was times she took me like to the end of myself. I was just like, I don't like my child. And just say that I don't like you. I didn't tell her I don't like you, but I'm just like, you said the black place that, I felt that. And then what happens is when I'm tempted to anger and to sit there, because I'm aware we have an adversary and I'm aware of my own flesh. I sit there, okay, the reality is this is my flesh and blood. This is my daughter. She is a gift that God has given me. God calls children blessings. So it's like, what do you choose to believe? The righteous will live by faith is what the scriptures say. And it's like, okay, I believe this. Lord, I don't see how this is going to work out. In fact, all signs point to bad, but help me right now. I only have the present right now. I don't have the future. I can't worry about what she'll do as a teenager. Help me to love her now. There's times be angry, but do not sin. Okay, fine. Sometimes you can be angry over some pretty stupid things that they do, but it's like, be angry, but do not sin. Do not, come out in harshness or do something cruel or mean, or abusive or something like that. And it's like, out of your love will be the thing that checks that, and the recentering on God that will kind of check that. And and some of those battles are hard. You crawl through them. Through them. But when you look back after some of those, I've just seen the fruit of it. God's blessed it. In Isaiah, he said, God says, I will honor those who honor me. Mm-hmm. And it's not an instant thing a lot of the times. It's not like, oh, he honored me this one time, so just perfect, it's going to go wonderful. It's like you get down and you trudge through it.
Yeah.
And in time, your fears are quelled as you see God moving. Now, I'll tell you what, a lot of people don't want to do that because it's hard. It really is. And you have to lean on something other than yourself. And I think that brings back to the point of what we're talking about in this thing, this article, why they do look at kids as kind of, oh, this is terrible. Because it does require a lot. And if your focus is more yourself and ease and all that, then man, Christianity ain't going to be for you. I mean, it's not. You'll have to lean on something other than yourself, and that's God and His strength, and all these other things, and and you're going to mess things up, and you need God's help to fix things. Anyway, you get the point. So, anyway,
Judah Rinzel, not me. My name is McNeil. So Judah Rinzel, I think I only he's a fantasy football player, and I only added him because his first name was Judah. I'm going to add him on Facebook. And it turns out, actually, Allison, who posted earlier, her husband went to school with Judah. So there's a connect. Anyway, so went to school with Judah's brother. Judah says, in this world there will be trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world. Gotta look up where that's from. But yeah. Yeah, take heart, and it reminds me of. Have you ever watched Firefly or Serenity?
You're talking about the movie? Yeah, I saw the movie. I saw Serenity. That's the Firefly movie, right?
Yeah. Well, in Firefly, the series that runs up to it's these old, hardened, futuristic fellow army buddies, and there's a saying they say: when you cannot walk. When you cannot run, walk. And when you cannot walk, crawl. And when you can't crawl, someone will carry you.
That's actually pretty interesting. Yeah. There's been times I've literally had, okay, God, you're having to carry because I got nothing left. And you'll find these really weird things. And it actually deepens my own faith. I'm like, God's living. People are like, oh, how do you know God exists? Dude, I've experienced Him. Okay, you want to hear the stories, we'll tell you. But I think that's where we become witnesses to God and that He is real. So.
Amen. Michael Cedrus says, I went to school with his brother. So Judah Rinzel went to school. His brother went to school with Michael Cedrus. Hey, Michael. Michael and Allison are married. And so, okay, so thanks for tuning in, everybody. It's been an hour. Thus ends our time. Mike, would you be able to come back on and talk about more things?
I'd love to. It'd be wonderful. I would totally enjoy doing this again.
And anybody else who Judah Rinzel, Michael Cedrus, Allison, Miriam, Diego. Actually, I will be talking to Diego later on. Hit me up.
Over tacos.
Oh yeah, talking about tacos. We've had a lot of good conversation over some tacos. But hit me up. My hope is to. I've got a lot of interesting friends. Everybody in the comment section and Michael here. My hope for Not a Show is to not be a show, but to be something where we dig into topics. And so thank you guys for tuning in. Thanks for talking this out with me, Mike.
You're welcome. I enjoyed it.
And we'll see you next time. Tomorrow I'll be talking to Josh. Who knows what we'll be talking about? Maybe more of this. And so good night, everybody, and talk to you later.
Take care.